What's up, world? What's up, Facebook? And what's up, Doc? How are we doing today?
I'm doing well, Kevin.
Nice to meet you officially.
Great.
And Doc, what brought you here to Concordia?
Yeah, well, I'm here at Concordia, Kevin, to talk about the low number of minorities in clinical trials. There are more people over the age of 70 than there are blacks and Hispanics in clinical trials in the US. So that's what I'm here to talk about.
Why is that?
You know, I think there could be a bunch of reasons. I actually think there's an unconscious bias that we don't actually, as physicians, ask people of color to participate in clinical trials. I think there is some distrust of clinical trials. There's an experiment called Tuskegee. Have you ever heard of Tuskegee?
No, I have not.
When I talk to young people nowadays, and you're in that group, Tuskegee to them means the airmen in a movie. But historically, it relates to a trial that was done in Tuskegee, which was about the management of syphilis. And they allowed black men not to be treated and did not know that. So there's some distrust of the system. There's some financial barriers. So these are things that we need to study and learn.
Yeah, I mean, how does that impact society when these people aren't going through these clinical trials?
Yeah.
I mean, how big of an impact is that?
Well, you know, clinical trials should be studied in who they're going to be used to treat. And obviously, women of color get AFib, black men get heart failure. So do people respond differently? Do you and I respond differently to a drug because we're men versus a woman? Do people that are African American or Hispanic respond differently? And we're starting to think that there may be some differences in some circumstances, something called epigenetics,
right,
which could be, you've heard of epigenetics.
I have.
Okay, good.
Yes,
All right.
that is one thing
I
I've
won't
heard of.
quiz you. But there's this sense that our environment has an impact in how we respond to medications or whether or not we develop certain diseases.
Now, how do we go about this process? I mean, what is the solution behind, acquiring more diversity in these clinical trials?
So I'm not completely sure of the solution, so that's why I'm here at Concordia to talk about it and hear all these great minds come up with ideas. But the first plan, and that's what I worked on at the Food and Drug Administration, is transparency. Let's get the data out there. Let's let everyone know. So you probably didn't know that there were only 3 to 5% African Americans in clinical trials, or 6 to 7% Hispanics, or 40% women. So let's get the information out there. Let's look at it. A lot of people here are into math and science, and we can look at data and then start to think about those solutions and understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think transparency is just such, it's a big issue right now, and we need more of it. What does a conference like Concordia do for you in terms of bringing these solutions and bringing these facts to a different audience?
Yeah. So it brings thought leaders that I otherwise might not have met. And health really is a global issue, so it's not unique just to the United States. So even though we're here in New York, it's great to be able to talk to these thought leaders from around the world about what are the challenges that they're having, in their, region or their country. So it's great to hear a different perspective, because sometimes when you're in the weeds, you're not always thinking about what's the right way to address it. And sometimes someone will come in with an idea, which I'm hoping to hear, that, I might not otherwise have thought. But, I talked about in one of my sessions that, Martin Luther King said nearly 40 years ago that the greatest disparity is the disparity in health. And if you told me your zip code, I could, with some reasonable certainty, tell you how long you're going to live. And I'm in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Washington, D.C. is about 10 miles in diameter. And within 5 miles of the Capitol Dome, just 5 miles in either way, there are these tremendous differences in life expectancy based on where you live. So if you live in Anacostia, which is a region where most blacks live in D.C., your life expectancy on average is 10 to 15 years sooner than if you lived in an area like Cleveland Park. And that's not right in 2018, and what are we doing about it? So much of it is not just access to the healthcare system, but access to fresh fruits and vegetables, access to physical activity. So it's really about trying to figure out these solutions, but I bet you didn't know most of these disparities. So that's what I'm here to talk about.
And that's what I'm here to highlight, because there are so many things and so many pieces to this puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So, you speak with somebody, the refugees, you speak with somebody who's covering news channels, who I just did.
Yeah.
You speak with NGOs, politicians, so many pieces.
Right.
And it's just sometimes hard to ration for people at home who don't really understand that something so little like more clinical trials making clinical trials more diverse could have such a huge impact in terms of life expectancy for your fellow Americans or your fellow
But if you had cancer, you'd want to be in a clinical trial, right?
You're darn right.
And
I
you're
would.
a white male, educated, you're going to get in a clinical trial. And you live here in New York?
I live in, shout out to Westland, Oregon.
Okay, all right. Well, there are probably some good academic and other institutions. So you're going to have access to healthcare. But you know what? That's not right if you're someone of color, or if you're poor, or if you're uneducated.
No,
so why should it differ if you get cancer versus someone else? So there needs to be equity. And people need to be outraged, and they need to want to do something about it. So you're not going to suffer those disparities, and I'm not going to suffer those disparities. There are plenty of people that are here have suffered those disparities and are talking about those disparities.
I spoke with somebody at a conference last week, and his product was the most sexy thing you'll hear, but it was a pinch valve for processed in terms of making pharmaceutical drugs and medicine.
Okay.
So this process, the founder of this company had cancer and received a clinical trial or a clinical medicine over somebody that didn't have the privilege to.
Okay.
And so what that might do for somebody actually with cancer changed his outlook on life, and therefore invented this product to speed up this process, to 3D print these machines to make pharmaceuticals and medicines. You should talk to him. It's just little things like that can make such a big impact. And I love talking to you, and I appreciate all your great effort here. And now, last thing we'll ask is, for our viewers out there who might not think that they can make a change in the world, what's one piece of advice that you'd give them?
I mean, it's really about getting engaged. So the way we're going to change the number of people that are involved in clinical trials is to get folks interested, to get folks engaged. That's what happens when it's live. We just have people come by. But we have to have people involved, and we have to have people get engaged. We have to become educated on the issues. So that's what's great about being able to be here at Concordia, to find out what the data really shows. But people can do that at home as well, and then they should be mad about what the information shows and want to do something about it.
I think that's great advice. Doc, appreciate your time.
Facebook,
#Concordia18. Take it back to you, all right? Until next time.